You are listening to the INCJ podcast, Conversations about International Criminal Justice. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our International Network Criminal Justice Live podcast. This is the second episode in a series called Just Psychology, when leading international psychologists and experts are invited to examine important justice issues and bring their particular perspectives to bear in conversation with a live audience. Now, Professor Jo Clarke from the UK is the joining factor who's attending all of these events, but we're going around Europe and elsewhere in the world to get different perspectives. My name's John Scott, and my job today is to chair the podcast and invite both people on our panel and those that join us to ask questions and contribute to the discussion. Thank you very much for joining, and you can find details of future episodes on our website. Now, the subject is resilience and retention of staff in the prison service. And we hope the conversation will be both lively and interesting. Now, how's this going to work? Well, we're hoping to have a conversation. So the topic is going to bounce between the four of us around the table today. And if you have questions and want to send them in, it would be great to have them either on the chat line or any other route you'd like to send them by email or whatever. It would be great to hear from you. But we're going to have a perspective from Gustav Tallving, and then we're going to move to Croatia, where we have Iva Prskalo, who's going to give different perspective from Croatia, and then we're going to switch to Jo Clarke, who will bring a perspective from a UK view. And as we talk, the hope is that different questions, different views are going to emerge. And we don't want to be too straightforward. And the hope is that we'll have different ideas that would be helpful to different parts of the world. So that's our aim. And I'll try my best to keep us on track and keep us going. But first of all, I'm going to ask Gustav, Iva, and Jo to introduce themselves. It's a rather good way to check that the connections are working. So let's start with Gustav Tallving, who's from EuroPris. Gustav, say something about yourself.
Good afternoon, John. Thank you for inviting me. So I'm calling in from The Hague, and that's in the Netherlands. But actually, I'm not Dutch myself. I'm Swedish origin, but moved to The Hague 3 years ago to take care of EuroPris post-pandemic and making this organization grow and thrive with the great membership that we have. I have a small team working with me here in The Hague, where we are situated with the office of EuroPris, and it's 5 team members working on communications, events, finances, etc. To introduce myself a bit more in detail, as I said, I'm Swedish, and I studied sociology, so I'm a sociologist for origin in my academic studies. And through my studies, I was very interested in deviant behavior and power relations, actually. So it wasn't a coincidence that I started working in remand prisons during my study time in Stockholm. Through that interest that was growing, I applied for a position as probation officer in Stockholm later on in the early 2000s, which was a fascinating job, and I really enjoyed that period of my life. Moving into the training academy in Stockholm, where I was training other professionals, especially in probation, but also in prison, in risk assessment and substance disorders, etc. After a couple of years there, I was recruited to the newly reinstated research and development unit and the head office in the Swedish Prison Probation Service. And I worked there to build up a new unit with the scientific council and the whole procedure to commission and conduct research within the service. Moving on in my career, I worked a couple of years in the Director General's office, and that's where I was introduced more into international cooperation and international work. So it actually started with a project in 2014, which is now 10 years ago, which was called Prisons of the Future. So my first international trip was actually here to The Hague 10 years ago. That was a fascinating project, EU project. And there I got to more acquainted with EuroPris as an organization, which was very young back then. It was only a couple of years old. I started working for EuroPris some years later on part-time as a policy officer. So I got to know the organization even better. And then I was asked to take the position as executive director in 2021. So that is my background. In terms of interest, I already mentioned sociology and social issues, but I'm also very interested in human rights aspects of the work we do. And of course, international relations. I'm really fascinated about the power of collaboration, both in teams, in organizations, but also internationally. And it's sort of becoming more and more obvious to me that the European continent is really needs to cooperate to solve its questions together, rather than doing it in silos or on the nation level, because so much related to crime and drugs, etc., is now internationalized, and then also the solutions need to be international to a certain extent. So I think I'll stop there with my introduction, and I hope you're happy with that start.
Well, we've found out a lot about you, and all of that will inform the discussion to come. So thank you, Gustav. Let's ask Iva the same question. Where are you, and what's your background?
Well, thank you, John. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. When I say here, I'm usually in our capital from Croatia, Zagreb, but at this moment I'm saying hello from vacation. So I'm on one of the islands of Croatia. So my name is Iva Prskalo. I'm a psychologist by profession, and I'm currently doing my PhD, where my research focus will be related to the topics of employee well-being. More specifically, my interest is heading more into judicial police officers, security stuff. So I have been working in prison system since 2011, and for the first few years I worked with juveniles in correctional institution, and until recently I actually worked as a head of the department for international cooperation at the only training center we have in Croatia. So both experiences simply led me to work today in the psychological support department for prison and probation service staff, where actually when you think of the focus of the work is on well-being of employees through psychological support and preventive programs for employees. So somehow I already was thinking a lot of well-being during my work with juveniles, and while I was looking at my colleagues and listening their needs as practitioners. So somehow this department gives me opportunity to think more widely on that level. I'm also a licensed supervisor in a way that I'm one of the supervisors giving supportive supervision for probation and prison staff in our ministry. And also, I'm part of the EuroPris expert group on well-being. So that being said, I think it's kind of obvious that my interest goes a lot on well-being topics, and somehow I see connection that is always integrated from trainings to research till, let's say, contact through the staff on the field, on practitioners.
That's great, and you're seeing the people working both in prisons and I think in probation from both the beginning, but being employed, but also the pressures of delivering the job. And you're seeing them as whole people with different tensions, or the demands of the job, but also how you can support them in that. Absolutely brilliant, and I can feel the energy already, and the way we can follow this up and talk about both Croatia and what's happening elsewhere. Welcome, Eva. It's great to have you. Jo, tell us a bit about yourself. I can see you're also wanting to get going on the questions, but let's find out about where you're coming from.
I'll try and keep it brief. I'm sitting in York in England, where I've lived for the last 24 years, having come up to York in 2000 to do a PhD to look at the impact on prison staff of their work. So Eva and I will have a huge amount in common, and I'll try not to monopolise this whole podcast by asking Eva about her research, because that's what I want to do. But I want to go back further than that, because I actually joined the prison service last century in 1990. I qualified in 1988 in psychology and didn't know what to do. Saw an advert for a job in prison and thought, oh no, I'm a bit young for that. It might do my head in. So I didn't apply, and actually worked in probation for a couple of years, supervising offenders in the community. And then I felt a bit more grown up and a bit more mature, so I applied to join the prison service, joined, and was told I was going to get posted to the Isle of Wight to work in a prison that was going to become a centre of excellence in the treatment of sex offenders. And I remember vividly thinking, don't think I want to work with sex offenders because I think that might do my head in. So for the last 35 years, I have had clearly been really tuned into the idea that our job might impact us. Doing my PhD in 2000, 10 years into my career, was partly prompted by two colleagues taking the prison service to court for psychiatric injury as a result of their work. And I think it's very natural for us to think that it's the job that causes the impact. And that's where I started. But then thinking, actually, we were all doing the same work. So why are some people impacted and not others? And what's the role of the individual? What's the role of the nature of the work? What's the role of the organisation? And what's the role of us as individuals? What do we bring as a person with a life outside of work? You know, we take ourselves with us wherever we go. So my PhD was enlightening. I had the best time doing it, went back into the service as a wellbeing advisor in high security prisons, and then had an opportunity to go back into academia for a number of years, and was, apart from managing or directing a master's in forensic psychology, at that point also undertook some research that was funded by the European Union, initiated by the State Probation Service of Latvia, and it was called the SPORE Project. And it was looking at sustaining probation officer resilience across Europe, and involved Estonia, Latvia, Bulgaria, and the Netherlands, and the UK, obviously. Fascinating piece of research. I know that the final report is still available for people to read. And it really reinforces the idea that if we're going to thrive at work, we really need to be looking after the whole person right from the very beginning of their career, right up to the point at which they leave. So it is a very holistic approach, and you can probably tell, I'm completely passionate about it. I now run a small not-for-profit company called Petros, and we specialise in enabling people to thrive at work, not just in criminal justice, but across any sector and any industry. We pride ourselves on the fact that where there's people, there's Petros. So because we're about the people, we're about understanding the individuals. So that's what I do for a living. Aside from that, I'm a very keen equestrian. So I've got a horse that I regularly get into trouble with. Fell off last year and broke my back. That's a very interesting impact on how you manage your working life. I also am a foster mum, and that came actually from my experience in prison. So long before I was a mum, coming across men who in the 90s who were in prison, who were usually in the care system in the 70s and 80s in the UK, having hideous experiences and thinking, I have no idea what kind of parent I'm going to be, but I know I won't be abusive or neglectful. And that sparked a dream in me to foster, and I've been doing that for the last 20 years. So it's very relevant. It's very relevant to resilience and well-being as well. So yeah, I'll stop there. I could talk forever, as you know, John, so you might have to cut me off.
Oh, okay, so we've got a whole load of different interests coming to bear. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with Gustav. And the thing about EuroPris is it brings an organizational perspective to an overview, as it were. Gustav, perhaps you'd like to start the conversation and take it away.
Thanks, John. Just a short comment on Joe's description. I think it was very fascinating. And I would say that not being abusive or neglective is also a good baseline for prison services, I would say, in terms of setting standards, etc. But yeah, so European prisons today, I mean, EuroPris is a member organization, and we have 39 members, with Poland, Moldova, and Greece recently joining, which we are very happy for. We are regularly taking the temperature of what's going on in Europe. And the last couple of years, we've asked our members, like, what are the pressing needs in your institutions, and what is going on, and in what way can we help you improve? So in those conversations, 5 areas of priority has emerged. And the first one is organized crime, which you hear more and more about, and maybe especially from my home country, Sweden, which is used to be, let's say, representing like a golden standard of social rehabilitation and corrections, I would say, is now serially suffering from organized crime, and with the results also inside prisons. Which brings me to the other topic, which is overcrowding. So we see overcrowding now in countries where this has not been present before. Some countries have more of a static situation almost in terms of overcrowding, like England and Wales, France and Belgium, for example, has for a long time suffered from overcrowding. But now we also see other countries that with quickly rising populations. So this is, of course, related to political changes in Europe all over. And it's very important to follow this development. Third topic of priority is violence between prisoners, but also violence against staff. So this is really an issue, and it's also with new generations coming into prison, which has evidently less respect for authority. So there is a lot more hostility among younger generations, especially in certain gangs, etc., where it's almost let's say a tribute or to the gang to hurt a prison officer. So that is really serious development that we see. Fourth, I would mention the mental health disorders in prisons. And that includes, of course, substance abuse disorders, which is the most common one, I would say. So these 4, of course, are also interlinked, as you know. So organized crime is very much connected with the drug trafficking, and which is also happening inside prisons, unfortunately. Violence is often also related to conflicts about drugs, etc. And overcrowding is, of course, a result of not only always the political changes, but also actual changes in crime structure. So we have to respect that fact that, again, with the example of Sweden, Sweden is facing an unprecedented wave of bombings and shootings, which has to be managed somehow. And last but not least, the fifth area, you can also put it at the first, but I thought it was more of a twist to the whole list. Staff is the fifth area of priority. Most countries put it first, actually, because it is a very big challenge already, both when it comes to recruitment, the well-being, as Eva mentioned, and also retention of staff. So I think this podcast is very timely in that sense, because it addresses one of the key priorities for European prison services. And sort of all in all, this situation, which is maybe not so optimistic, but still it's what's going on. It's a reality. This shows that being a prison officer today is one of the tougher jobs you can have in the public sector. And we try as an organization, a professional association, to highlight that this is also something that decision makers, leaders, etc., has to take into consideration when it comes to staffing levels, training resources, and other kinds of staff well-being efforts being made. And as you know, just the basic job of being a prison officer is challenging in itself, balancing security with rehabilitation and also the regular care of people in prison. So all that together is sort of painting maybe a little bit of a pessimistic image, but I think it's more important to be realistic than sort of painting it as in brighter colors, because what we see now is several quite serious issues for our members. So I think, this is causing stress among our staff in prisons, and more long term, of course, that also affects job satisfaction and the probability that you will stay in this position. So again, it's all connected, and we can't work on just one thing only. We need to approach this holistically and keep several tracks running at the same time to improve conditions for prison staff. I think I'll stop there for now and maybe leave the floor to someone else.
Well, maybe it'd be a good idea to go straight to Croatia and ask what Eva's perception of those staffing challenges is. And we can get some illustrations from Croatia about retention and recruitment issues. What have you got to say about that, Eva?
Well, first, I would say that my focus will be definitely onto staff, because it's my area. So what I want to do first, maybe give just a very short context of Croatian prison and probation system, because just to have an idea what are maybe some few numbers are. So we are part of the same directorate, probation and prison service, for a few years now. Our directorate is part of Ministry of Justice, Public Administration and Digital Transformation. That's new. Croatia is a very small country. We are talking about less than 4 million inhabitants. We are all over the Europe, but in Croatia, it's less than 4 million inhabitants. So under our directorate, there are 2,700 employees working, so including our head offices, both, and practitioners. So we are talking about more than 4,000 incarcerated people. So we have under our directorate 25 organizational units, including prisons, penitentiaries, diagnostic center, juvenile correctional institution, and training center. And when we talk about probation, we are talking about 14 probation offices around country. So why am I saying this? I think it's a very much different approach when you have small country and this kind of numbers of staff. It's for some things it's much easier to organize some things like recruitment, educational programs, training center programs, and things like that. But for some things, it is not, because if you have everything in your capital city, it's like it's a small country. It's possible to organize, but of course, for some regions, it's much harder to be part of some things. And saying that, it has effect, of course, to all of the topics I'm gonna say about. And I will start first with recruitment topic, because I think it has a lot of things regarding resilience of staff. Because when we see perspective, for many years, this actually hasn't been a subject of concern, because working in prisons, it was very attractive in terms of better working conditions, benefits, salary, early retirement, as well as the safety of itself, like having a job. So when we see it like only a few years back, we didn't have anything to do with this topic. And now, because in the past we had so many candidates for job openings, so it was easy when there was a job, a lot of people were applying for that. Today, the issue is like how many people will even apply to a job. So it's very hard. Are we thinking now to have a good selection process, recruitment, or are we taking anyone here, and what are the consequences? Okay. So nowadays, it's not just about prison staff in general. It's not easy to find workers for any profession in Croatia. So a significant number of people have moved to better paying countries in the Europe and beyond. And regarding recruitment, I think our focus should be now on how to attract the right people for the job that awaits for them despite these challenges. Because we talk a lot about the good PR, but that's not the end of the story. Because in Croatia, we are making extra efforts to present a more positive and realistic image of the system. So you can see when you go online, there are a lot of internet articles that are not associated just to a crime, to like bad news. More and more content is being written in a positive context, and that's good. But for example, like we had a lot of joint exercise, our correctional officers with external intervention teams, forces and military. We have a lot of positive posters about getting into service. And we have a lot of successful stories in agriculture about production in prisons, etc. So that's a good way to attract people to our system. And I think we are very far away from the point where children will not just be saying, I want to be a pilot or I want to be a doctor, but also say, I want to be a correctional officer or a prison staff member. But this is a nice way to promote us, like, let's go positive with the system. But what is often mentioned in our system is the story of the young people. I will call that the story of the young people who are often unfairly accused of not being what we want them to be. That they look at the screens, that they are not modest, that they are not capable or motivated like our generations. That's usually the sentence. And we say that they don't listen and so on. I think regarding recruitment, we are making a mistake here, which is that instead of focusing on what they are not, we should invest energy in learning from them what they are and what new things they can bring into system. I think that's also like some interesting topic for when I'm looking on recruitment process. So not forcing them to repeat what we did. Maybe some things they do see that we see as a laziness, maybe, or perhaps it is a better use of time, and maybe they do some things in an easier way. So I think we need to teach and listen to each other and include best ideas from both sides. I think that's also a topic. Yep, Jo, I see.
Yeah, I've got up in front of me an article that was written by Professor Tony Blockley at Leeds University. I will send it, and maybe even the website INCJ would like to put it up. He was talking about police recruitment and talking about the fact we're recruiting in our own image. So if we're trying to recruit Gen Z from the image of, in my case, a nearly 60-year-old woman who grew up in a completely different culture, we are always going to fail. So I completely agree with you. And I think we need to understand the needs of Gen Z and recognize that we are recruiting people. We're not recruiting a job role anymore. People don't want a job for life anymore. They don't look for the financial security that perhaps I was encouraged to do. I can't talk about you two, you both look much younger than me. But, even for me, it was a job for life and job security. And that's not of interest to Gen Z. Younger people who have grown up in the technological age, who are completely at home with digitalization and everything else, they want completely different things. So we need to start recruiting the people to the role. We need to understand their values. Do you want to join criminal justice because you're interested in rehabilitation? Or you want to do something worthy and make a difference in the world? Or are you looking at it because it's a uniform discipline service where you get to be authoritarian and practice power, which I think would speak to some of the things Gustav was speaking to. And I think both those things are absolutely reasonable motivations for joining the prison service. We don't need a whole load of people like me who want to do good and rescue everybody. We do need people who are disciplinarian, who practice their authority and their power in a compassionate and benign way, obviously. Going back to what we were saying earlier about not being abusive and so on, or neglectful. But we need to think about what are the needs of the services internationally. Yes. And how do we recruit the person to the role and not recruit for the role? How do we understand the values of the people that we're recruiting? So that was really prompted by, I could say so much more, but that was really, Gustav's.
I just want to sort of continue on the same path, because I think it's very important with the new generations I went to a very nice presentation here in The Hague in the Congress of Probation and Parole a month ago. And there was a presentation from a strategic HR expert. And she said that we have to stop thinking in the sense of buying workforce, but rather building workforce. And I think that was a very good image for me, even in my own job, because it's very hard to find qualified staff in the Netherlands. It's like, just in my region here, it's like 500,000 vacancies. So it's very hard to find staff. So then you have to start thinking rather in building competence than recruiting it even, or buying it from the market. So it's a completely reset of how you should think as a manager in the recruiting company or service.
So I'm really curious, that every sector is having problems recruiting people. Where is everybody? What are they doing?
They're getting older.
You think that's what it is? No, but the population's growing so fast. Is it that we just don't have the numbers of people we need, and therefore really need to make this work attractive to people? Because it is amazing work. It's extraordinary working in prison. And I think, the reactions that I've had moving out of prison into corporate and the charity sector, I'm fairly confident that the success comes from people thinking, crikey, if you can survive in a prison and thrive in a prison and learn so much in a prison, that's an extraordinary thing to have done. Then why are other people not seeing prison work as something so extraordinary and actually so privileged? Because it's probably the only profession where you don't get a glimpse of it somehow. You know, we understand what our health services are like. We see police staff on the streets. We understand about policing. People don't know about prison because it's such a closed environment, and it is such a privilege to work in one, despite all the challenges. But man, do you learn stuff doing that.
Yeah.
So it happens behind closed doors.
Yeah.
And people have to imagine and find ways of identifying with that type of work. We were talking about, if we hold with recruitment, if people are not going to have a single linear career within one institution or one profession, I'm wondering to look to Gustav and Iva, how can you make working in prisons fit better into a portfolio that you could maybe work for 3 to 5 years in a prison setting, gain skills, gain experience, and then take it somewhere else? Is that maybe something that institutions, organizations need to think about?
Iva, you want to start?
Please do.
You can go on, Gustav. I'm still into that topic. I want to add something before,
Okay.
but yes, I will join you.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, okay, let's start big then. So I think, to be honest, that so the state needs to activate as one employer rather than having agencies competing with each other. So police and defense forces cannot compete with prison and probation or other agencies in the same sector. So I think it's important that the state, to attract talents, to start with, needs to have more of a unified employer strategy and allow people to move between different jobs. And there are so many thresholds and, let's say, obstacles for moving between sectors within the state. In some European countries, is almost that you are imprisoned if you work in prison. You can't move to any other profession. You can't even move to another prison to work because there has to be a vacancy there. There's no one promoting you to change position even. So it's really a rigid system, and I think for the sheer survival of these services, you have to start think bigger than only the prison service. You have to start think about the state as an employer. But that's, of course, the bigger picture. But in terms of attractiveness, I think there's a lot to do. But I think you have to start again with the narrative. So I think, I mean, prisons, I mean, I used to work in probation. That's hard to explain to people. Most people at least know what a prison is. Probation is impossible. I would say that the general image of prisons are very much affected by media, which is mainly reporting about incidents, and then popular culture, where prisons are depicted as places of terror, basically. So I think that is sort of a narrative that we want to change as EuroPris as well. So we have that in our coming strategy, actually, to start working more on the public, let's say, awareness of what prison work means.
Yeah, Iva, let's come back to your agenda. How would you?
Yeah, I wanted to add a few things. I think, yes, changing work position even in prison system or probation service among each other in the same directorate sometimes is very hard. So for me, I think it is important to actually allow people to try some things. So we were doing some good examples of job shadowing, like people from probation service coming one day to prison and on the other way around. And we have some good examples of people transferring from one system, like maybe social service, to prison service and things like that. So I think it is happening, but very slow, and people, while they're waiting, they lose their like motivation and they go away. So for me, I think it's too long process. It should be more fluid. And sorry, I just wanted to add that we don't forget somebody about when we talk about recruitment. Yes, young people and to learn their language, but I think when we talk about maybe security stuff more, like judicial police officers and etc., we have an age limit of giving them opportunity to be employed in our prison system. So for me, it's like, why do we put age limit? I think we should reconsider, because times are changing. People live much longer, and for me, when I'm comparing some of my colleagues, like maybe some colleagues in 40s or 50s, sometimes they are more in better physical shape than younger people. And what do we need to recruit somebody only because it's young? Because we have maybe opportunity to bring someone in system with a great experience, like with healthy and mature way of thinking. So why don't we consider of moving limit? That's the Croatian story. We don't have, we have that age limit. At this point it's 35 for judicial police officers. It's uniform security stuff. For me, why not to think of? I know in some European country there is no limit, and in some there is. So maybe just example, I think there is a place for everybody because we are missing people. So, Joe, I saw your hand and.
No, always have so much to say about these things, because I don't absolutely agree. It seems crazy to have an age limit, and recently we've been involved in training new recruits into various of our private sector prisons, and they are recruiting older staff, and it's so to be celebrated, because they bring so much maturity, stability, and they bring stuff that as a younger member of staff, you know, and I was 25 and joined the prison service, my brain was still developing. So in fact, if we're only going to recruit younger people, we're asking for trouble, not because younger people aren't marvellous, but because, you know, there's still so much learning to do. And we know from neuroscience that we're not really fully formed till our mid to late 20s. So we're so missing an opportunity if we don't pick people up. But what I wanted to also comment on was the unified employment strategy, because I've recently been invited to another country in somewhere miles away, which I shan't mention yet because the work's not formalised. But one of the issues they have is it's a country with a fantastic tourism industry. And what happens is that people train to work in the prisons and they get really good training, and then they leave and go and be security guards in a tourist resort. And I was just idly discussing exactly what Gustav was saying, is why is there not a relationship between the security industry and the prison industry, and people can rotate around them? Because the prison industry there requires people to move away from home because of the geographical landscape. They have to move away from home for 9 months of the year. That's really hard, you know, to ask people to do that. That's not treating somebody as a whole person. That's looking at the job role and trying to squeeze people into fit. And that's probably partly where our problems are. So I think the idea of saying this is a state employment, you may have a particular interest in working in a prison, but we might also require you to do policing or to do security or to do the army or other of those other disciplined services. But I think the problem is, and at the risk of being a bit political, our politicians are scared rigid of doing anything different because they want to stay in power. And you'll probably have seen over here with the general election coming up, in an attempt to appeal to older voters, our current governing party is suggesting bringing back national service. It's just hilarious, really. I'm sure there are some advantages, but it just goes to show that the politicians are not seeing the whole picture, and the civil servants who really run government, you know, are not in a position to instigate the kind of change that we're talking about here. And I think we need a radical wake-up call if we're going to keep funding or keep running our public services in a way that is humane and compassionate. Because what's happening in the UK at the moment, and Gustav was saying about the overcrowding, because our go-to response appears to be to lock people up. I mean, how unintelligent is that? How unintelligent is that? And then treat people dreadfully when they are.
Shall we never apologise, Jo? Let's take that as an opportunity to move from the issue of recruitment to the, in my view, completely allied topic of retaining people once you've recruited them. Because, I mean, Jo used the illustration of people in a country being forced to live apart from their families for 9 months. There may be other retention issues that we could give attention to. So, Gustav, when you were giving the overview, staff retention, which I think is often talked about as turnover, people not staying long, men and women not finding the work either attractive enough or well paid enough or rewarding enough to stay. So retention is clearly an issue. So perhaps we could turn our attention to thinking about whether there are solutions about turnover. So who would like to kick off on that?
I can start, and I think, I mean, so what is work satisfaction? Work satisfaction is relative. It's a sort of evolving over time, both in your personal life over time. When you're 20, 25, you can work 14 hours a day and you're happy still. And when you're 35 with kids, you have a different preference. So it's you can't really say that there is one job that fits all, so to say. And then when you look at work satisfaction, every job has its requirements, so to say. So not everyone is fit to work in prisons. As I mentioned, I work in remand prisons when I was 20 years old, and or 24, sorry. And my friends told me, like, how can you work there? I would never be able to work in such an environment. So it's also not for everyone. We have to admit that, and that is, which to me also be, let's say, a more exclusive job in that sense, because if you manage to work in prisons, you're a really, really, let's say, qualified person. If you manage to balance these roles that I mentioned with security and rehabilitation, having that sort of trust, respecting your personal sphere, etc. So I think in terms of work satisfaction, because that is basically causally related to retention, I think that is, we have to sort of acknowledge the positive sides of the job, and at the same time be aware of the difficulties, and not sort of hiding those away, but rather addressing them one by one. And that has to happen from, you know, team leaders all the way up to the director general, like acknowledging these challenges, and then show your co-workers that you try to address them, because people tend to be quite resilient if you show them that you're working on it, so to say. But if nothing is done, if you're just left alone, that's neglect, as we talked about in the beginning. Then people start to get apathic and start looking for other jobs. But if you know that your manager and his manager or her manager is working on this to find a solution, that will keep you going as well. So I think it's very much of a leadership question, because it will never be paradise to work in prison. Then you should have another job, you know.
What's a Croatian view about retention?
Well, we actually had outside institute that is at this moment doing another research about satisfaction while working in prisons, with prisoners and with prison officers, but also with prisoners, like how do they feel inside the prisons. And we done our little small qualitative study, focus groups with several prison correctional staff, educational institutions, and with probation offices. We were interested in how people see rewards in system, whether they had thought about leaving, and what would help them to stay in system. That was very important to see much deeper. So we mostly expected, regarding our salaries that are not very big, we expected the focus on material things, and which is not excluded. Of course, people want bigger salaries, as well as they have desire for more days off. But majority of participants actually focused on relationships inside prisons, like with their superiors, with their colleagues, especially they focused on quality feedback on their work, greater support, appreciation, praise, like the small words of thank you for doing it in a nice way, and thank you, you were very good at this. And they really focused on opportunity to be recognized in a way that their skills in work and assigned tasks are somewhere put somewhere to be used. Like if I have one good skill, please can you recognize that? That was the idea. If I have it, please can you be a person that can recognize my skills. So the other thing is actually the idea that people really enjoy of pass on their knowledge. Like if they have a good knowledge about something, they are happy and open to share, like in a way of being mentors and things like that. So based on that research, we also conducted a quantity study, online survey, and actually people, we send it to all prison and probation staff. So we were kind of, let's say, surprised that people put very high grades on that kind of non-material things, like being recognized and things like that. So I think in our system in recent years, we are actually introduced many measures aimed to support officers, because since 2017 there have been many trainings conducted, not only aimed like at specialized skills for better work with prisoners, but also we are investing in trainings aimed to strengthen the officers' capacity, mental health topics and things like that. And also for the last few years, from the Department of Psychological Support, there are a lot of trainings that are supporting management in better communication with their staff, and how to support employees in seeking psychological support and things like that. So I think there is a lot of things going on in a way that actually, like from 2018, there is a psychological support department that we didn't have that. We were, let's say, dreaming about it. How can we be supported and not just be punished when something bad happened, like when an incident occurs? So I think considering the cultural environment, there is a lot of prejudice of seeking good training or psychological help, but one of the key activities is raising awareness and the importance of mental health care. I will say a few words more about our other activities, but I see Jo is raising hands, so maybe she's into this part.
You carry on, Eva. It's just really interesting. I just wanted to pick up on a few things, but carry on.
Okay, great. So what we also recognize that more and more trainings and preventive activities needs to be tailored to each prison or correctional facilities, as they have their own specific things. Because we approach individually to prisoners, and the idea is like the approach we nurture towards inmates, individually and personals, we need to do it in the same way to the staff. Like it's very specific to work in a small prison, big prison, or open penitentiary or closed one. So it is important to follow the atmosphere that is going on between staff. So also what we done, we found one day in a year that will mark Mental Health Day for us in our system, and it is like the way where we do various educational and team activities and sport activities, and let's say do some fun things. It's a symbolic date when our department of psychological support was founded more than 5 years ago. And also, I wanted to say that during the years of working in prison system, it is easy to fall into trap where you don't see the changes. Like you always think we are stuck to the bad things, but I think when you put yourself outside individual perspective and try to see what has been changed during years, you can see a lot of things are actually moving. So today we have mindfulness trainings in Croatian service. Well, if somebody tell me, I don't know, in 2016 that we're gonna have trainings that are specific for staff, not for being better, like in special trainings with prisoners, I would say you're crazy. But today we have a lot of things going on for trying to be open and to hear stuff, to retain, to make a change.
Well, that's a real investment in the staff, which surely would help with retention. Jo, you reflect on what you've heard about what can help with retention.
Well, it's so interesting to hear that what's come out of your recent research is that it's not the material things that matter to staff. And I'm just going to expand that and say it's not the material things that matter to people. In all the organisations I work in, if you say, what does your organisation focus on to attract and retain staff, they'll say salary and benefits. And if you say, and what's important to you, they'll say being seen, heard and understood, which is exactly what you've just said. And it's the same the world over, because we're human beings. You know, we want to be recognised for what we do. We want to be understood for the individuals that we are. The principle of volunteering is that essentially if people's values are met, they'll work for nothing. Now, I'm not obviously suggesting that people work for nothing, but can you just imagine if your values were so aligned and so attuned with what you were doing for your job, and you felt so recognised and valued and looked after, that if you won the lottery, you'd still go into work every day? Those are the environments that I think we need to be creating. And we do that by understanding our people. And that makes perfect sense to me, and it is not rocket science, and it doesn't cost a fortune. It's really interesting to hear, Eva, what you were saying about the training of managers, because we so often promote people on technical ability, and we don't train people to manage people. We train people to manage processes and procedures. And I've been musing lately with the idea of, why don't we just promote people to be people managers who are really good at it and that's what they want to do, and then promote other people to manage the processes and policies and procedures? And why don't we split those things off? Because some people are naturally just brilliant managers, and I'm sure everyone listening will be able to think of at least one person that they would walk through fire for. And I'm lucky enough that I've had a few of those in my working life. So I've been so lucky. I've also had managers that I would probably walk away from if they'd broken their leg because they had no, that's really cruel, isn't it? I'm not really like that. I was going to say something even ruder. But anyway, so we, you know, to be able to have those people that make us feel valued and understood and recognised in the way that the Croatian staff have described, in the way British staff describe, American staff describe, other countries in Europe describe. This is not even a cultural difference. This is what people want. And if we're blind and deaf to that, then we deserve to not retain people. I mean, because it's so easy to do. And it's the other thing I just wanted to comment on as well is about psychological support, because obviously I'm a psychologist and I'm often the last person that somebody wants to speak to, because there is still that suggestion that if we need a psychologist, there's something wrong with us, which actually is a bit crazy. If you think about, if we need a doctor, we don't hesitate going, do we? We don't think we're all vulnerable because we need to get some medical intervention. And we should feel the same way about our minds, in my view. We should treat our minds the way we do our body. I think we treat incidents at work as a psychological injury. I can't bear the post-traumatic stress disorder label. It's not a disorder. Somebody's been psychologically injured. We treat them the same way as if they've been physically injured, but we don't. It scares people, so we don't look after staff in the same way, and there's still that stigma attached. So in my view, what we ought to be aiming for is a psychologically informed strategy that sees someone right through their career and empowers them with psychoeducation, gives them knowledge. And we've done some work over here actually training staff in what we call trauma preparedness, because we know when people are going to work in prison, they are going to experience trauma, either directly because they get assaulted or threatened or taken hostage or get injured, or secondary trauma in that they will hear offenders talking about their offending. They're going to see families come in really distressed. You know, that we're exposing people to trauma all of the time, and yet we don't prepare them for it. And the work we've done here with a small group of staff working in a young offender institution is to train them in some of those sort of executive function resilience skills and in an understanding of trauma and what it means, trauma preparedness. And what we found is that those staff who've received that training not only are more likely to stay in the job for longer, to not go off sick as easily, but fascinatingly, more likely to get involved in incidents at work, but less likely to get assaulted. And that was a really interesting finding. And I think my hypothesis around that is that because they understand trauma, they understand it from their own perspective, they probably approach prisoners differently, because prisoners, by the very nature of being in prison, are going to be traumatized too. So if we're going to retain staff, we really need to empower them. We need to give them the competence, recognize the impact they have, make sure the job has meaning to them, and that they have some autonomy in the way that they do their work. And for me, that's what organizational resilience is. It's about meaning, impact, autonomy and competence. And if you can get those four things in place for staff, they are likely to flourish, they are likely to thrive. And we've got some evidence for that. So I'll stop there and hand it back over to Iva.
Yeah, what I'd like to do is explore the connection between an individual resilience and organizational resilience. If we go back a few years, certainly in some cultures, say in prisons, staff were just expected to keep quiet, get on with the job. And I'm thinking that is now not the right way of handling an incident or pressure. And I'm wondering if we could look at how an organization can be resilient, but also can assist individuals to be resilient. Gustav, perhaps you could set us off on answering that question.
Yeah, so I would like to pick up on something that Iva mentioned in terms of what sort of empowers staff. And one of those things you mentioned were in your research was to mentoring others and training new colleagues at work, etc. So I think that is something to really acknowledge when you try to build a resilient organization, because if you have sort of this will to teach and also will to learn all through the organization, that is sort of opening up also for discussions on topics like mental health or vulnerabilities or trauma or also new needs occurring within the, let's say, the people in our care. So I think trying to move from let's say an organization that is focused on order and discipline to be more of a learning organization. I don't think there is a conflict there, but I think it's more of tradition that prisons has been very focused on compliance and order and only getting feedback when something goes wrong. So I think that is sort of that is definitely not like a narrative that someone is, painting on top of prisons. It's coming from within. So that has to change from within, I think. So moving towards a more learning approach and more learning for life, maybe. So if you acknowledge that, I think also staff would be more stimulated and willing to stay.
Very powerful point. Iva, resilient organizations, resilient individuals?
Yeah, I would like to, the things I said before, it's more like, yes, organizations should provide support to staff, definitely, let's say, through education, through psychological support. We have also supervisions as a supportive group. I think we are missing the things that Jo said about having better education of understanding trauma of prisoners. I think we are lacking of that, but we are increasing education of psychological support and mental health awareness. It's something that is now also part of our basic course for uniform staff and for other staff. So we are increasing those things. But what I wanted to also say that what seems extremely important to me is strengthening our own responsibility for how we are. In a way, of course, organization needs to give some tools and has to put some kind of possibilities for people. But I mean, there is no doubt about that. But strengthening the responsibility of individuals for themselves, everyone's resilience is strengthened. In a way, they feel part of the system. And according to research, this gives people a sense of participation, which is an important part of encouraging motivation. Saying that, I will give you an example. During some of our education, the most common sentence was, "System didn't give me anything," or I will do nothing because nobody cares. But I think it's important to give back responsibility to individuals in a way. Okay, but who makes the system? Are we all part of the system? So bringing back individuals to being aware of their responsibilities, not just for themselves but also for others, for prisoners, I think it is strengthening their resilience also. And of course it makes a nicer supportive network for others, and that has everything to do with making organization being more resilient, having people aware of their own responsibilities. So for me it's like there is no one side and the other. We are all one big network, needs to do it together and making like small steps and building organization in that way. So
thank you,
and I agree.
Jo. Thank you, Jo. Your reflections.
I'm gonna actually have a go at defining both individual and organisational resilience, and I'm just going to build on what Eva said about individual responsibility, because it's critical. We disempower people if we take away their duty of care to themselves. So what we talk about on some of our training is our three duties of care. There's a duty of care of the organisation to the individual, and that's usually enshrined in law. But an individual also has a duty of care to the organisation, and that's enshrined in their contract. So they need to come to work fit to work. They need to be able to speak up and describe things that are stopping or getting in the way of them having a good day at work. And as you say, we are all part of the culture. The culture is us. And every time we stand back and we don't speak up, we're contributing to a silent culture, which is really unhealthy. And the third duty of care is our duty of care to ourselves and to each other, which I think you touched on. And I find it really helpful to encapsulate duty of care into those three areas, because I think it gets people thinking as well about their own duty of care to their employer and to themselves. But I think there's a really lovely definition of organisational resilience that comes from what's known as the critical occupations literature. So working in prison would be considered a critical occupation in that it exposes people to trauma that can exert critical impact on their psychological well-being. So it was a phrase coined by Douglas Patton and John Violante. So Douglas Patton works in disaster recovery and researching, and John Violante was a New York police officer and went into academia. And I think it's a very fitting phrase for people working in prisons, because it can exert critical pressure, but the key part of the definition is under certain circumstances, and we need to understand those certain circumstances when critical pressure can be exerted. And they would define organisational resilience as the ability of individuals, teams and organisations to be able to render challenging events meaningful, manageable and coherent through drawing on individual and collective resources. So in prisons, when critical incidents happen, to be able to draw on all the individuals and the organisational processes that help us make meaning of those incidents in order to thrive. So that really, I think, captures what you were saying, Eva, about it's a joint thing. It isn't just the organisation, it isn't just the staff, it's all of us, and bringing what resources we have to render critical incidents meaning manageable and coherent. The individual element of that, I think, is tougher because the research is quite complicated and some people do appear to be born naturally resilient. The research would suggest about a third of people are. For us at Petros, we define resilience as the ability to respond adaptively to the pressure that you're under. And sometimes the adaptive response is to soldier on, it is to keep going. But actually, sometimes the adaptive response is to stop and take a break. Sometimes the adaptive response is to ask for help, because resilient people aren't people who think they can do everything by themselves. Sometimes the adaptive response is to have a good cry, because it's not that resilient people aren't emotional. It's just that they know how to manage and express their emotions. So it's like a set of skills. And I think resilience has recently, in the last sort of 20 years, although psychologists have only been using the term for about 50 years, because it originally comes from engineering, people think that resilient people are strong. And therefore, if you're not resilient, you're weak. And I think that's really unhelpful. I think resilient people are skilled, and not resilient people haven't got the skills yet. And if they haven't got the skills, let's train them. And those are the things that we can train as we put people into these critical roles where we know that they're going to have psychological pressure exerted on them. Let's give them the skills to manage that pressure adaptively. So those would be my definitions, John. I'm sure Eva and Gustav have comments on that, but I hope that's helpful.
Well, thank you very much, because that's given as a framework for the discussion, which has been good. Now, you probably aren't aware of how fast time has flown by, because you've been talking with such focus. It's been brilliant. I'm going to ask each of you maybe just to have a reflection on our discussions about the people side of working in prisons. I'm going to start with you, Gustav. Do you have any big picture final thoughts that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I think our conversation today has really sort of illustrated the wide range of topics that you need to take into consideration when you talk about resilience. And we talked about the different levels of responsibility, which I think is very important, that every individual has the responsibility to take care of their own resilience. And I agree with both Jo and Eva that you, of course, have a certain sort of setup of skills when it comes to resilience, but it can also be learned. So there's things you can do to improve your resilience. And moving on to the leadership level, I would say that there is a lot you can do, and first, second line managers, definitely in terms of follow-up and support, psychological support. And from the organizational perspective, it has to do with, of course, work hours and all these structural matters, but again, also how to affect, let's say, the work satisfaction in terms of mobility between positions, even professions maybe, or agencies, but also creating this image of public sector to be a relevant and interesting and fascinating place to be, to work, to spend your life. So I think that those are sort of different levels of interest. And I just, when we had our conversation today, I sort of can't really enough underline the need for individual resilience when working in our sector, because something that is very demanding is the people in our care has immense needs. They are endless, basically. So you have to have that kind of sort of integrity to separate yourself from those needs sometimes, because otherwise you'll be completely consumed by it. And that happens sometimes to younger officers, that they get so sort of committed with the needs of the prisoners that they basically burn out because they can't limit their ambitions. So I think of this quote sometimes also in my own work, that you can't pour from empty buckets, and I think that's very good quote to keep in mind when you work as a professional. If you work as a manager, that you have to take care of yourself and your own limits and honor those limits. Otherwise, you can't take care of others. So I think that's a good conclusion to wrap up with.
Fine, and good advice to pass on to colleagues. Iva, do you have a final reflection and maybe a piece of advice to pass on as well?
Well, I will not repeat what Gustav says. I said I will agree on that. I will just remind ourselves, all of us, that working in prison environments means often that people are changing, and if they are resilient, meaning that they are not staying the same, that after very hard situation happened working with inmates, with offenders, that leaves mark. And I think it's in a way healthy that we change. So saying that, I would say that we have to remind ourselves that prison system and probation service is changing in a way that changes are not bad. It only means that our organization is resilient in a way that these times are changing it. So I think we should be open for that. Being different, being in some kind of changes doesn't need to be something frightening. It means that we are adapting, that we are not resisting, that we are being resilient. So that's something that I'm thinking of when I'm kind of summarizing all what we said today. So that's from me.
Thank you. Jo, a reflection and a piece of advice?
A reflection is that I wish governments would wake up to some of the harm that's caused by agendas that really don't serve our communities. Controversial, I know, but it was lovely to hear what's going on in Croatia, and that's obviously endorsed in a public sector, and it would be lovely to hear more of that around the world, but particularly at home at the moment. My advice to staff working in criminal justice, prisons and probation, is take time to reflect on the things you love about what you do. Remind yourself about why you're doing it and the importance of that job and the value of that job and the status of that job. And if things are getting in the way of you thriving, do everything you can to overcome the things that are getting in the way rather than leave. Because we need experience, we need the wisdom that comes from doing the job for periods of time. And your colleagues need that too. So we all need each other. So look after yourselves out there.
Good advice. And with that, we have come to the end of our podcast. My final reflection is that I'm hoping a lot of bosses of prison and correctional services around Europe are going to listen to this podcast, because recruitment, retention and resilience are big issues right across not just Europe, but across the world. And I'm hoping that there are people listening who can make a difference in the way that they organize their structures and processes, as well as their people. So thank you very much to our three speakers, Gustav Tallving, Iva Prskalo and Jo Clarke. We are planning another Just Psychology podcast, and we're going to make a visit over to the United States next month. So keep a watch out for that and make sure you join us for that event. I'd also like you to listen to another INCJ recent podcast, which was done in partnership with the United Nations, which launched an international research report called Digital Rehabilitation in Prisons, really very relevant to some of the topics that we've talked about today. This was a first for INCJ, so do catch that podcast if you can. Go to the INCJ website and you'll follow the links there so that you can find the UN report. Thank you very much to everyone for attending, for contributing, for watching and listening. This event will also be available as a podcast on YouTube, so do encourage your colleagues to listen in and join the conversation by visiting INCJ's website at criminaljusticenetwork.net. Goodbye, everybody. You have been listening to the INCJ podcast, Conversations about International Criminal Justice. To find out more, go to our website at criminaljusticenetwork.net or follow us on Twitter at INTCJ Network.